Again people, this is ELAVI Truth TV and today I'm going to be tackling the subject of school reopenings and the battle for the souls of your children. I don't know if you remember when this whole COVID fiasco first started, and it's still to some degree still talked about, but there was a whole debate as to whether children were actually immune to the so-called COVID-19 or coronavirus thing, whichever they want to call it. And this Illuminati puppet called Elon Musk was in some controversy when he came out, because don't forget, he's one of the so-called geniuses that they push on the masses at this given time in order for us to feel dumber than he is. But this is really a dummy. He has no real intelligence, but he's thrust upon the public in order for him to be some kind of genius, and we're supposed to look up to him. He was debating as to whether children were actually immune. But the system didn't want us to think that children are immune, because children and the schools are actually going to be the battleground for the control of the minds of people. So what happened is that they've let the schools reopen, not for the health of people or for any other reason than this. If you can't get children back into schools, you really can't restart the economy, says Scott Glibb, former head of the FDA. Samuel Toombs of the Economic Consultancy Panel estimates that around 2.5 million workers, 7.5% of the UK workforce, have had to take time off to look after young children during the pandemic. The ONS estimates that wider educational sector, which includes universities and schools, contributes to 6% of the UK national output, the GDP. Mr. Toombs estimates that if pupils are still only out of school for around half the time, this would hit the gross domestic product by 4%. That is estimated 7 billion per month. Yes people, money is the driving factor behind why children have to go back to school, because we know, and many of the populace know, that without the children being in school, the people are not free to boost the economy. But there's another reason why the children have to be put back in school, is because of mind control. The children have to be educated and they have to be indoctrinated, more to the point, into the system. This article came out recently where Boris was saying that the behaviour of children was going to be problematic, i.e. the children are not being conditioned in the way that they were, especially in the terms of the way the world is now, where people are waking up to the truth of what's going on around them. So the children need to be indoctrinated. But what power do they have over the children? The truth is this: when we signed over our children at birth, or should I say when we registered our children at birth and were given that receipt, the receipt we call the birth certificate, we actually signed over our children to the state. And that's why this can happen. Let's go in.
It is going to be obligatory for all children to return to schools unless there is good and proper reason for them not to be there, so there will be fines, yes. Just the other week we launched the £1 billion coronavirus catch-up fund, making sure that we target help and support to those children who most need it, those children who have missed out on the education, whether it is for a situation at home where they maybe not had the same level of support. But it's also why it's so important we get every child back into school. We're already seeing children operating in a different way in school as you see them in wider society, in terms of the creation of bubbles around that child, a protective environment, making sure that we reduce the chances and the vectors of transmission. So if someone does get coronavirus, there's less chance of them passing on that virus to others. These are all sensible steps in terms of a cautious and careful approach that we've taken, but they're proven to work. But we'll be seeing
In one breath, the Education Secretary is talking about supporting children that most need it. But in the same breath, he's talking about using bully tactics on parents. Because I would suggest that the only reason why you're going to find somebody who is preventing their children going to school for fear of their children's safety, I would suggest, is a bully tactic, coercive. And it also monitorizes anybody who decides that they do not want their children to be put into a dangerous environment, or what they perceive to be a dangerous environment. So what's actually happening now in the schools, how are the children actually negotiating this new reality that we're living in? Well, Scottish children have gone back recently before the UK children, and American children are going back. Also in Europe, children are going back. So there's no standard one way that children are operating. Some are having to wear masks in common areas and some are not. Let's look at some of the issues that are happening in schools at the moment.
Every aspect of school life has changed, really.
This will be a return to school, a September like no other.
We're going to have a very heavily staggered start and finish to the school day. We are asking students to stay in their classrooms so that we minimise the amount of movement around the school.
A whole new set of structures to protect staff and students.
We are increasing the length of lessons. We can't any longer have assemblies. Everything from the beginning to the end of the school day and outside of the school day is different.
And as schools in Asia and Europe have gone back to campus, we see other precautions. Checking for fevers, disinfecting belongings, kids wearing masks, and those tiny face shields. The scale of preparing for these changes is huge.
Well, we've been talking a lot about face masks and whether or not they are going to be worn in secondary schools in England. Has the government committed a U-turn? Joe Pike joins us live from Westminster. What do you know, Joe?
Well, they seem to have changed their policy. You could possibly call it a U-turn, Jane. Certainly Boris Johnson has now dropped advice against using masks in school. So young people can wear masks. Of course, this is mainly focused on corridors and communal areas. But masks, we're told, will be mandatory in English schools when they are in a local lockdown area, such as Greater Manchester. The message from government today is when the guidance and the science changes, their advice changes, they are being flexible as they need to be in a global pandemic.
The summertime coronavirus caseload, which may have peaked in the U.S., but it's nowhere near over. This morning, hospitalizations are increasing in 15 states. Over the last 7 days, 5 states have reported record numbers of deaths. All this as schools and colleges across the country struggle with their reopening plans. Here in New York City, Columbia University now deciding to go completely remote learning for the fall semester. ABC's Trevor Alt is there with more. Good morning to you, Trevor.
Good morning, Eva. America's education systems are really in flux. Every day from every corner of the country, there are new announcements like Columbia's, canceling in-person learning, postponing sports, and that's as some schools who have reopened fight sprouting outbreaks.
Across the country this morning, some schools are fighting desperately to plan around the pandemic, and others are reacting as the virus hits home. At Oklahoma State University, sorority Pi Beta Phi's off-campus chapter house is now under quarantine, with 23 people there testing positive for COVID-19.
With over 41,000 deaths so far, the UK is among the countries to have been the hardest hit by COVID-19. Millions of pupils nationwide will head back to school this week. For many, it comes after months staying at home. Our correspondent Ty Enright has more on the preparations involved.
Schools like the one behind me here, schools across England and Wales, can begin to start reopening on Wednesday of this week. And the guidance includes, well, many of the things that you would expect. Guidance on social distancing, the washing of hands, and keeping pupils in small groups or bubbles and avoiding cross-contact between those bubbles. On the question of masks, there are differences across the country. In Scotland, they'll be mandatory for pupils in common areas.
One thing that is totally clear from all these reports from across the world is this: confusion, utter confusion. The children are being used as a battleground for the future of our planet. It's so important to understand what's happening, because as this whole process is rolled out and more controls come into the schools, because give it after the so-called second wave. Now, I'm not trying to predict a second wave, but I'm watching the way things are going and the way the system wants to keep on enforcing these lockdowns, enforcing restrictions on our children. And there's only 2 ways you can control people, 2 ways you can control children: through the mind or through force. Now, we're seeing all over the world at the moment where incidents of control is happening and people are being ostracized for not wearing masks and so forth, and people's human rights are being violated. But we have to look at what's happening in the actual schools and see if our children's rights are being violated and who actually owns the children. We have to start fighting for the children. And it's going to come to a case of what is more important, our freedoms to work and to go here and there, or our children. So I want to look at this last bit of footage, last news report. Let's go in.
If you want to know what will happen next with COVID in the UK, it helps to keep an eye on comparable countries. This is Berlin today. Thousands of people protesting against coronavirus restrictions. Now, much of this is politically motivated, but still, these crowds feel comfortable enough to make their point because cases have been low in Germany for several months. Is this the future for the UK? Or is this Paris, where masks have been made mandatory in the street? An amazingly tough measure given what we know about transmission outdoors.
This news segment, asks the question what's going to happen in the UK, but I want to extend it into what's going to happen in the world, because as I say, it's a battle for the planet now. It's not just about human rights and our freedoms as individuals and adults, it's about the children. I made a video about what's going to be happening with the sexual education of the children. So the children are being attacked from all fronts. I started by saying it was once debated as to whether children were less susceptible to this, and I mentioned Elon Musk saying that children were immune. Now, hasn't it come full circle now, where so many cases are being reported and people are actually putting forward that children should be tested every single week? Now, if we look at the coronavirus bill, it has a section in there on DNA profiles, and the government has made it so that they can keep any material taken from the body which constitute a DNA profile for longer periods. So once again, I'm going to ask the question, who owns our children? Because this is the battle for our souls of our children. And if the government are able to hold the DNA of our children, then who owns the children? I'm going to end this with something that many people will have seen, because this video has gone round a lot. It's been shared hundreds of thousands of times. And it's a guy who was tasered for not wearing a mask. And this is the side of the control that's happening to do with force that we can see and we can fight, as this guy on the subway did try to fight. But in the schools, the mind control that's happening, are we able to fight this? Are we able to stand up and fight and say what is happening to our children? What will the next generation be like after they've been indoctrinated in the new coronavirus world? Let's end with this one. Let's go on.
Is there anything I can do or... And like I told you... Anything I can do or say? Anything I can do or say to ask you to get off the train? No, look, I'm going in. You didn't have to speak to me the way you did. It's on camera.
It's all on camera.
I'm not speaking to you. I am telling you, if you don't get off the train, I will ask you if I'm all from the book. You're not allowed to touch me by law. I am fully...
Underlying health conditions, you don't have to wear a mask. Underlying health conditions.
I do not have to wear a mask. End of. And you do not have to challenge me either. It's against the law to challenge me. I'm not going to argue anymore. Yeah, it's against the law to challenge me as well. I'm not getting off. Come on, then. Yo! Who the fuck do you think you're grabbing? Who the fuck do you think you're grabbing? Hey, who are you grabbing? Who the fuck are you grabbing? No, get off me! I've told you, no! Now get off me! Or I'll get you locked up. Now get off me! Now you've been told. Get the fuck up. Oi! Who the fuck are you grabbing there? I'll spray you, mate. What? You're not spraying me for nothing?
He hasn't done nothing wrong. He hasn't done nothing wrong. He's done nothing wrong.
Get off me!
Medical conditions. Medical conditions.
I need to speak to you. I'll spray you. Get up.
Medical conditions.
Let go of me.
What are you hitting him for?
You're pointing at me. What are you doing? Ah, you little dickhead. You got moving. I'll spray you, mate.
Lads, you're pointing at me, not even pointing at him.
Yeah. I'll bring you 119BX. Assistant floor level.
I've got every bit of this.
Get off me now.
Mate, he's done nothing wrong. He's done nothing wrong. You're on a power trip here.
Yeah.
You're on a power trip.
And I've already spoke to you and told you why I don't have to fucking wear one. Let go of me, I'm fucking.
You let go of me.
Let go of me. Get off him, man.
You're the one on him.
Let go of me.
You're the one, you're a bully. You're a fucking bully.
I told you I don't have to fucking wear one. Off the train, mate.
By law, he doesn't have to.
Wow,
underlying health conditions.
Get the fuck off me.
Not on the train. Trying to get the train.
You are? What the fuck's he doing? Let go, mate. Fuck off me. No, I've been fucking told. Get the fuck off me. What are you fucking doing?
What's your name and number, bro?
Wow,
Bro! Over there, how can you meant to move? You're bang out of order, mate. He's bang out of order.
Mate, chill out, calm down.
Mate, it's him. It's him. It's the busy.
This is why I don't wear masks. Chill. Come on. Get off me. Chill. Tell him to get the fuck off me.
Mate,
this is why I don't have to wear a mask.
It's all on video. You're bang out of order.
I don't have to wear one.
You're bang out of order.
Calm down.
Mate, he's bang out of order.
All this over a fucking mask. Get the fuck
off. All this over a mask.
What's all that about?
It's all on film. Hey, it's all on film.
Over a fucking mask, lad.
You're a bully.
You're a bully. Tell him to get off me. What's he doing?
You're a bully.
Walk with him. No, tell him to get off me, mate.
You're walking to stop being a fucking bully.
Tell him to get off me. Hey. You're listening to me. I want his number, mate. Tell him to get off me. I have explained why I
don't have
name and number.
What's your name and number?
What's your name and number, lad?
Name and number.
Hey,
get off. Get off me fucking feet.
I have his number. What's he doing? Calm me. You've got that in your face. Why are you standing on his throat?
Hello?
No, I'm not coming up saying I've got to go and pick
this officer, bully, bang out of order.
I'll sit here now to the next stop to tell him to get off.
Assistant, floor level. Central State 3, Wirral line. Bang out of order. This police officer is a bully. A bully. An absolute bully.
Listen, I'm sat down. I've sat down and I've told him. Calm down. Calm down.
He's a bully.
He's just assaulting me.
He is a bully.
I'm not going off the train, mate, when I've got to go and pick my daughter up. Come on. Tell me. Don't have to wear a face mask.
Who are you? Who are you? He's a bully. He's a fucking bully.
Get off me. Right, this is the reason why I don't wear my mask. To get the fuck off me. Whatever.
He's a bully. All this because he's a fucking bully.
Get me stuff. Get me stuff. Hold on. What the fuck? So you're doing all this with face like you've choking over. Hang on. Fuck! Alright, fucking hell, I wasn't.
Hello? What's your name and number?
Release that, mate.
4943. That's his number. 4943. 4943. 4943. What's your name, sir? What's your name, sir? What's your name, sir? What's your name, please, sir? What's your name, please, sir? What's your name, please, sir? Get out of his back, Mr. Bully. You need a warrant for that. You can't do that. 4943. What's your name? You stood all over my feet, spray in our direction. What's your name? By law, you need to tell us your name. What's your name? What is your name, please, sir? What is your name, please, sir? Look at him ignoring it now because he knows he's in the wrong. What is your name, please, sir? Hey, look at that. Won't even tell us his name. Won't even tell us his name. Can we have his name, please? Officer, can we have his name? It's all on video. Every bit of it's on video. He's a bully. He's ignoring me. Excuse me, sir, can I have your name? Look, I want his name. His name, please. Sir, can I have your name? No, I want his name, please. He's all